Did you ever watch a movie that was based on a book and then read the book because you're curious about the book from watching the movie, but the movie and the book had nothing really to do with each other, but you understood by reading the book why they had to make the movie they did? Let's talk about Moneyball. Welcome to Matt Reviews Books. I am Matt, and this is a book review channel dedicated to older books, some older than others. Most of the time, you'll find these books in the used bookstore, or at a flea market, or an estate sale. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in watching, hearing me talk about, go ahead, subscribe, which is down there, the big red button. So this week we're talking about, what's his name? Michael. This week we're talking about Michael Lewis's Moneyball. And if that name sounds familiar, you know, it had some legs to it. It had a lot of life, and it was talked about a lot of places, and especially in the sports section. If you were reading the sports section in 2003, 2004, 2005, it would have been around. It was all those sports columnists and writers would have mentioned it at some point. And then they made a movie. They made a movie with Brad Pitt. Now, again, like with Patriot Games, I am not going to get into the differences between the movie and the book, except that what's really important about Moneyball back there is not actually seems like what showed up in the movie. I guess the best way to do this is to dive into it. All right, let's get started. Synopsis. All right, so Moneyball is basically a documentary looking at the 2001 Oakland A's. It does go a little bit before that, but it really is looking at how did Billy Beane, with absolutely sort of like the smallest budget in Major League Baseball, put together a team that would establish Major League Baseball record for consecutive wins in a single season. A lot of rookies and a lot of veterans in their last years. People who were coming back from the disabled list, and people who were being transitioned to other positions. They were players. And so Michael Lewis takes a look at that and says, hey, what's going on here? How can this team be winning, and what was the secret behind it? And there was nothing really earth-shattering. It was because all the stats were already there. And this is a stat-heavy book. If you're not really into baseball, you might get kind of lost. I personally think Michael Lewis does a really good job at explaining the math, the probability behind the basic calculation system, what's known as sabremetrics, that would go into Billy Beane's decision making and making trades in the draft. To this day, Beanball is something completely different than what it used to mean. It used to mean getting hit in the head with a baseball. Now it's like small money, small ball, small budget, making the moves that most greatly impact that particular position. As a baseball guy, like I played like 2 years of Little League. I didn't play like high school baseball or college baseball. I love watching baseball, and I love stats, and I love the history. And reading this, really, this was a great baseball book, because it doesn't just go into the Oakland A's, it's also diving into the evolution of sabermetrics. And what's his name? Rick James, I think his name is. I think he's still with us. I know. I should stop saying I think, right? Because I'm supposed to be an authority on this stuff. I'm not. I'm an authority on my opinion about books. So if it's while weaving together the logic and the math and the reasoning behind all these different moves. It also goes into the players' mindset, the story of how they got to be where they were in 2001. Guys like Scott Hatteberg, who was a catcher and then got transitioned to first base. I just know I've read this book several times. A lot of my books I've read several times. And it also brings home sort of who Billy Beane is as an individual, and some of his motivation. And so I think with that we should move on. That's a very human point, and we can move on to thoughts. Again, if you're not a baseball person, you won't necessarily hate this book. You don't even really have to know the nuances of baseball as a sport. If you're a math person, actually, this is actually a pretty cool book because it gets into like math and statistics and probability. I'm not a math person, but I love how probability plays into baseball. Such a simple game with all this complexity that sort of surrounds it, and you can take it or leave it. Like, you can totally get into baseball as a mathematical problem, as this all these different variables. I'm kicking the tripod. Or you can just watch it as a game. Either way, totally valid. Totally. Michael Lewis's writing is also really clear and simple prose, but prose that, when it's necessary, it bridges the gap between technical, mathematical, really the number crunching, and the human. The human element. Why does this matter to me? Woo! Actually gives me shivers sometimes. Because I read it and it's like, I'm not a math guy and I love this book. I don't know what to tell you. So, I appreciate you watching. I hope you follow me along. Follow me along? Follow me along. I hope you follow along with me. Come along. We'll talk about books. And I will see you next time.